Hi everyone, I'm Julia from Unthinkable, and today I am chatting with Morgan Nowlen, who is currently chairing the Communications Committee at the 9/11 Truth Action Project. Thank you for chatting with me today, Morgan.
Thanks for having me chat with you.
Well, I just have heard about you and gotten to know you through some of the work with 9/11 TAP, and I have a million questions for you and want to pick your brain, but I picked 5 just to kind of take it a little easy on you this first time. So before we get started, do you mind introducing yourself to everybody? Because I don't know that anyone who's watching would know your face or know who you are or even know what 9/11 TAP Truth Action Project is. So take a few minutes and brag about yourself, Morgan.
Brag about yourself. I'm Morgan Nowlen, and I've been in a mode of truth research and activism since probably around 2007 for real. But I only came to TAP in the last year, and I came to them because I looked at the Justice in Focus conference that architects and engineers did in 2016, and they had the sort of sponsors and the logos at the bottom of this big giant flyer, and at the very end of it was 9/11 Truth Action Project. I'm like, Truth Action? I'm about that. So, I went to the website, signed up, left a little comment, and within like hours, Trina Maria, who's a wonderful human being, was in contact with me, and I've been working with 9/11 Truth Action Project ever since. I've helped out in like every department. It's kind of what everyone does, but I've helped out with the Truth Booth. I've helped out with communications. I've helped out with the podcast. I'm actually running the podcast project now, and we're just about to purchase, so it's really cool. But yeah, I've done a lot of stuff, and I've met some amazing people. Had some really great talks. It's awesome working for TAP, as we call it.
It's awesome and very encouraging and inspiring. I have only recently become familiar with the 9/11 Truth Action Project through knowing and being able to chat with Bill Jacoby, who is an incredible person who's done such tremendous work in and out of the 9/11 truth movement. Tremendously impressive individual. You ask me, I'm a little biased though. I love what 9/11 TAP does in trying to get the word out there and raise awareness in a way that's accessible to people. And I appreciate the work that you guys have done, and I appreciate your time. And I just want to kind of get to know a little bit more of the nitty gritty of who is this guy and why is he doing this, and what does he want the future to look like for 9/11 truth movement. So, you ready? All right. I have 5 questions for you, and then if you have questions for me, then you can ask me those.
Okay.
So my first question is, what was the first moment you remember encountering the 9/11 truth movement or 9/11 truth of any kind?
I do believe that I encountered 9/11 Truth, the movement, for the first time at a staff party for a canvassing group that I was working for in Los Angeles, and the director, he had that sort of first documentary you watch for 9/11 Truth where you're like, whoa, you got to see this, and so our director did that, and it was Hidden in Plain Sight, the guy that's talking about the plane going right at the building, is there a missile, all that stuff. And I think that was my first 9/11 truth type thing. I think that was it. But it was right around that time that I was doing all this canvassing door-to-door canvassing, fundraising, that whole thing. That I met a bunch of people that were activists in Los Angeles, so they were working on other things like voting, black box voting, stuff like that. There were other people working on other causes, so I sort of started hanging out with them and going to their conventions and meetings, and there was some really cool people at those meetings, and I really started to see the actual movement of 9/11 truth then, and it became really, really apparent fast that there was something there. But that's my
Sure.
long.
Sure. I have a couple follow-up questions. Just now, I don't need to know exactly where you live or were on 9/11, but you're on the East Coast. And were you on the East Coast during 9/11, or were you somewhere else maybe?
I was actually in your state, Washington, during 9/11. I was in Olympia, which is a great city. And yeah, I was in. I got my whatever. I got done with all my things. Went down to Safeway, just right across the street. Went in, got my coffee. Come to the checkout, and this guy is like, "Did you hear what happened?" And I'm, like, no. He's like, plane ran into the World Trade Center, whatever he said, and that's how I heard it. And then I have a long bus ride where nothing happens. I don't talk to anyone. I don't, it's like two people on this giant bus ride. And, so an hour later I get to where I worked, which is a daycare, and I come in and the teacher's like, "Did you hear what happened?" And I didn't, I just, I didn't really know how to take it. But yeah, at the end of the day, all of Earth was talking about it. And I really didn't think about it. I went to the Evergreen State College, so my mind, more or less a poli-sci major, my mind, was already very, very open to what's really going on, power struggles on Earth, and the dark side of the governments, everything there. But yeah, that's my original experience.
Interesting. Huh. Yeah, I was in New York. I was in high school, actually.
Right? How old were you? What grade?
I was a freshman.
Okay.
I just started at a new private Catholic high school in like the North Shore of Nassau County in Long Island. And it was the first couple of weeks there. I had come from a life of public school, so it was a rough time in general, but it was a really nice place. I just remember one day we're in, what must have been second or third period, I guess. And there were announcements that started, and then everyone just turned the TVs on, and then the bells still rang, but everyone kind of was like not really there. Like there were just so many announcements over and over and over and over, calling students down to the office, and we were watching it on TV. And I mean, I had no idea what was going on. I knew from that first moment when I saw what I saw with Tower 1 and 2 collapsing that something was very wrong. And then I thought about it a lot, probably because it was like, you could smell it from where we were. So thank you for sharing about your where you were on the day. It's always interesting to understand where each of us was going about our daily lives. And now here we are almost 19 years later. And, that day's affected us and affected the world so much. So now it's interesting to reflect back, and with people who were once strangers. Like, I didn't know you a few months ago, but we have a lot in common and have been on a similar journey for a long time, just didn't know. So let me ask you, let's just talk about New York. What do you think happened that you're willing to say? And I'm not going to nail you down to any specifics, I'm not gonna. This is not a trial by fire, and I'm certainly not gonna, demand that you always adhere to this. Just kind of generally, what do you think happened? And I realize that this is you answering, and not necessarily 9/11 Truth Action Project. It's just Morgan Nolan. And then I can tell you what I think too, if you want to know, because then we can both be held to the fire together.
Well, that's a question that will go as far as you want it to go. You could write an entire library full of information to get back to you on.
Not a bumper sticker.
Right. I mean, in basic form, there were two very, very high tech and sophisticated controlled demolitions, and there was one more routine controlled demolition. That's basically it. But I've actually done the most of my research on this. So I've read books by David Ray Griffin, David Alden, Kevin Ryan, and others that are, going into the blueprints of the building, talking about physics, chemistry, air temperatures, thermodynamics, seismology, putting all of the evidence, and you could easily go into probably 60 different scientific disciplines just understanding what happened that day, probably hundreds actually. So what I think happened is that there was this thing called nanothermate, which sort of half exploded and half acted as a giant sort of heat that got columns to be easier to bend. I feel like I'm sort of walking out on a limb I don't want to walk on sort of not, but I guess I'll leave. I don't know. I don't want to say something wrong, but here's the way that I like to say it. Basically, controlled demolition, you can get into the very specifics of exactly how they did it, and that's what is the cutting edge of 9/11 truth on that today. Very important papers. I'm just going to highlight. Wayne Costi has written a epic paper on how the towers came down. That said, evidence for explosives or explosions, that sort of thing, and high heat incendiaries is to if 9/11 was a murder scene, which it is, but if we're gonna traditional murder scene, husband or wife, bedroom. Well,
sure.
As far as wanting to find a murder weapon, all the evidence is basically there of say whatever the murder weapon is. I'm not going to get graphic. Flip it to fingerprints, maybe a better metaphor. If the fingerprints of explosives were going to be found there, what we find isn't just one or two. We find full handprints on the murder weapon, on the walls, on the doorknobs, on the victim, on the bed, on the getaway car.
Plethora of forensic evidence.
And really, handprints, DNA. People don't understand that the evidence is overwhelming and conclusive to the point of, once you've done a few thousand hours of research and sort of got your game going, you really realize that NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and all the other reports that were done by the government and outside corporate reports, those reports are the most scientifically written 4-year-old trying to get out of a lie. A 4-year-old got the cookie out of the cookie jar. The parents are like, "Did you take that cookie?" "No." "Why is the cookie jar lit off?" "I don't know. It's air pushed it." they construct a ridiculous story of how the towers and how Building 7 came down. That is, like other people have already sort of said, it's I forget. Well, I'll say it in my own way. Basically, it, the the reports are not natural. David Ray Griffin has written extensively about how they're not scientific and they don't stand up to the real hard line scientific hypothesizing, your scientific method. So they don't follow the evidence in a million different ways. They construct things that are not really even possible, but it's the best excuse they could figure out. So they have to. It's the truth when it's really the truth. If you find this that makes you think, suspect that something has happened, you're going to find it over there, right? If there's a heel here, I'm going to find the toe over there. Well, I should find an ankle bone right here. The truth is natural. It makes sense with itself. It doesn't need infinite calculations to figure out how it happened. Science is about, getting really into deep science. But ultimately, the government's reports aren't natural. They don't make sense with themselves. It's highly unlikely. They even admit that. They say basically this is the least possible thing that could possibly have happened. And the truth movement, we get closer to a real unified picture every day. There's stuff on the fringe, and that's sort of a different thing. But yeah.
Okay. I appreciate what you've said so much. It's clear that you appreciate the depth and breadth of interdisciplinary knowledge that's contributed to the current body of knowledge that we have about 9/11 truth. And that body of knowledge is complex, it's dynamic, it's changing, there's active daily commentary across the world, in various parts of the world, among people who probably would have no other reason to talk to each other, solely surrounding 9/11 truth. And while some people may say, the movement's dead, or nothing's going to happen, or there'll be no investigation, it's like, okay, you know what, just, it's fine. People can say or think whatever they want, but I know and I see and I experience, and I know many people who also experience the fact that this is happening every day. People are raising awareness every day. Every day, more people are being reached, and more people are just having the opportunity to consider the truth. And that's kind of what I want, in terms of, like, my next question to you is, what's the vision? What's your vision for the future going forward today for 9/11 truth? But I feel like my short-term mission is just to try to continue to raise awareness regarding the body of knowledge that's already been established and is that which is accepted and has been vetted by citizens of Earth, who are paying attention. And I know that a lot of it is controversial, but for that reason, I think it's also important that I don't want to convince anyone of anything, Morgan. This isn't like, this is what I know and this is what I believe, and I want you to believe exactly like I believe. I don't feel that. I feel like, okay, this is XYZ that I understand about what happened on September 11th, in contrast to the official narrative through the 9/11 Commission report and the NIST reports. And I want to connect with other people who also have questions, and I want to learn from people, and maybe we have to challenge each other. I think that there are many puzzle pieces, and we don't all have all of the pieces. Like, not one person has it. But I think that as we continue to raise awareness and more individuals who will also bring their talents to the movement, will become aware, then we'll be more appropriately positioned to continue moving forward through the appropriate paths of recourse that we have scientifically, legally, socially, and culturally. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but it's just like, even if one more person knows something today or considered something today that they didn't, then I would be considered that, the day would be a success in terms of our work. I'm going to stop talking. It's your turn. What's your vision, Morgan? On any time frame?
Okay. Well, as far as let's put the time frame all the way to the point where 9/11 truth has run its course by the story being broken fully, completely, fundamentally to the people, to the government, to the world. It has been dealt with by the police, the government, or the FBI, or whoever would go get the suspects. We're looking at the suspects. We're putting them in court. We're getting that done. And let's just talk about the American people, though I respect this is a worldwide thing and it's important for the world, but just to quarantine it to America, Americans, it will, with 9/11, 9/11 is, in my opinion, the key to everything. It's not only the most provable to people, though JFK, you can't come away from all of that research without thinking that something, exactly what you think happened. But with 9/11, it's fundamentally provable. It takes a while for a single person to get down to the science to see clearly the forest for the trees, but it is there. So it's the most provable. Number two, it's like the deepest. It connects to 20 years of war. It connects to the entire, it connects to the deepest of money. It connects the deepest of the covert black, super black, the USAPs, all that with our gut. It connects to everything, everybody. It really does that. And so it's like a giant spider web that connects to everyone. So if we were able to put 9/11 truth in a syringe and inject it into people's brains and it would make them know instantly, if we could do that to everybody, the world would I don't know if it would go into chaos, but people, the American people, would question everything. I really fundamentally believe that. I've thought about it a lot. The American people would, with full knowledge, on all the mainstream media saying 9/11 was an inside job, controlled them, story over. American people would evict the government, the world government. The people of the world would be forced to act as the people, however horrifying that is, because they would not be able to trust their government. And it wouldn't be one of those, maybe that was the Bush administration, but it was this scant little thing. No, if 9/11 truth, the basic parts of controlled demolition and, whatever, if that is broken, it's a domino effect. And it goes as far as I really, really, really believe all the way to getting a worldwide movement to rip out this giant corruption in the most basic sense.
Yeah, it's like a cancer that spreads, throughout our planet, and it seizes people and their lives and their assets. And if we look at the cost of September 11th, it's incalculable. The cost, not just monetarily, but in terms of loss of life that we could directly attribute to 9/11, because the dominoes fell and the ripples of the water are continuing to echo across every shore of this planet, pretty much. I mean, maybe Antarctica was not sufficiently affected by 9/11, but I mean, it
I
was
think I could probably
like
connect it.
What was that?
I think I could probably connect it.
But you know what I mean? I mean, it wasn't just that 3,000 more people died. It wasn't just that tens of thousands of people were injured and traumatized, and that millions of people saw it on TV. It's like 9/11 did not end that day. It is like the nightmare that our world can't wake up from, because first of all, people are still dying as a direct result from 9/11 illness. To this day, I could recite names of individuals, which I will not do, who currently have, cancer or, end stage disease as a direct result of their time at Ground Zero. And some of them weren't there very long. And I know other people who worked at Ground Zero who are totally healthy. And I think almost every day, whenever I see something about 9/11 illness, I'm like, God, please just, don't let more people get sick. But for example, I want to wrap up on this topic and ask you what's going to be my last question for you. This has been super awesome, honestly, Morgan. I mean, let's just think about the fact that let's not forget. Let's set aside the wars, what we've done in the Middle East, how all of those people's lives have been affected, how many civilians have died at the hands of our military, which I also respect and love. I support the troops. I support USO. I know people over there right now who are good people who want to serve our country, and I have no doubt that everybody who's over there is like everybody who's worn the uniform of any branch of the United States military, has my full-fledged respect until proven otherwise, honestly.
Yep.
Let's set their losses and their families' losses aside. Just going back to New York, it wasn't just the 3,000 people that died. It's then, since that time, we've had 2,000 more die of 9/11 related illness. And I guess maybe it's because I'm a nurse. That's my big soapbox. And more first responders have died since 9/11 than died that day. And that is like one thing that I can't let go of in here. And then when we go back to the fact that our government doesn't even have a fair, reasonable, clear, compelling explanation that people all across the world can agree on, and I don't mean the popular, what's it called? Popular mechanics or whatever version of it that doesn't even make sense. It's like, trust me, I tried to not believe that I tried to not agree with the notion that those buildings were blown up because it was inconceivable. And I read all the things of how it was fire and how it was this and maybe the aluminum and maybe the steel was weaker and maybe the fireproof nature. And I'm just like, no, look at those buildings. They were blown up. You can see it with your own eyes. And then to know that all of the scientific research lines up with it, with that hypothesis, and not with the hypothesis set forth by NIST and by the 9/11 Commission report, it's infuriating. It really gets me. And to know that people are still dying, brave firefighters, brave first responders, and innocent people, also just people who were there, who were fortunate enough to be spared on that day and who have to live with terrible suffering and the horror of a chronic illness that may be terminal. It's like, give me a break. Sorry. Here's my question. I'm a millennial. We're a weird bunch, right? And we get a lot of flack for all of our avocado toast and Instagramming and self-absorbed, it's not an ethnocentric. It's like we're so millennial-centric. We just like are this self-indulgent generation, but also we have a lot of innovation, we have a lot of creativity, and um, I don't know, we have a kind of disillusioned, jaded edge. And what I want to know from you, I don't think you're in my generation. I think you're maybe just a little bit older, I think. I'm not sure quite how old you are, but that's fine. It's irrelevant. You are the chair of the communications committee for the 9/11 Truth Action Project. And so the last question I have for you is, for other millennials like me, maybe, we are certainly in the minority in this movement. What would you advise us, or what advice would you give us in terms of advancing the 9/11 truth movement as a generation?
Um, Millennials are one thing to say about the millennial generation is that it's very independent. Each person is independent of the rest of it. If you go back to the 20s and 30s, the entire generation was homogenized. It all came in glass. Like the milk came with a bottle in the morning by the milkman. So it's just everyone, in the information age, in this giant sort of expansion into multi. There's no one head to anything. There's so many different stories, and it's just an ocean of information. And so millennials, I think, the hardest thing to get people to do in this generation is to work collectively. Uh, I'm actually Generation X. I'm the Kurt Cobain Nirvana, like not just disillusioned, but just completely agog at nothing matters. Who cares? Hate everything. Basically, yeah. So what I see is it's really tough for getting people to get together on something way harder than it used to be, where everyone was sort of in the same room. You could work with a much tighter nucleus because everyone watched this program at night. Everyone read the paper, the basic, the story was one. It wasn't a million different stories. So that's one of the struggles of this newest age and millennials and all that is to work together versus never-ending sort of sectarianism. And that is, as you know, anyone that doesn't know the 9/11 Truth Movement, well, there's a lot of sectarianism going on in our movement. This group's against that group. This group is, and that's not just, it's not. Let's not look at it as a bad thing, but let's learn how to focus ourselves as people, the people. When you think about it, the American people, the world people, the people is what it always comes back to. But the people is so not tight enough, not even close to being tight, and it's consistently being ripped apart and thrown to the far ends of the four directions. So the people in general, for a lot of things, need to come together. And I don't think it's the people on top that are trying to control everything and sort of herd us like cattle and to I think ultimately the only way to really bring about a great chance to save ourselves on Earth with all of these existential threats is for the people to become aware and work collectively. So that's one thing. But with the millennials, you're right. The millennials, the independents, everybody's creative. Well, I don't know. Everybody's creative, but everybody's got a small business now that they started where they're doing the. Everybody's got a little square of of their creativity. So the way I like to sort of think of it, I mean, with the collecting thing, really, as far as 9/11 Truth, getting that accomplished, which I think will work to get the people of the world to come together and in their own Congress, regardless of the governments.
Yeah.
Not anyway. One thing to say is that there really isn't that much to invent. The wheel's already been invented. The civil rights movement is probably the greatest example of it. Civil rights movement was worldwide, and it was people arm in arm. Uh,
Watch Crip
get
Camp
together.
on Netflix. Crip Camp is a great civil rights movement doc. Crip Camp, amazing.
Right? So yeah, there's the movements past that we really don't have to learn anything. We just need to relearn what they already did. But then past that, this is the information age. There's so many ways to get people to look at something, but it's very hard, again, to get all the people to look at one thing at the same time. So it's very hard to collectively use our bargaining power or get our own, get educated and have public opinion, so putting all that together, I like to encourage millennials to get really, really creative and sort of get past, get past the learned helplessness. We really can change the world. Let's turn that on. And then if you want to wear a cape and be 9/11 truth person that runs, through like I don't know, you got to be careful of Ground Zero because there's some serious, deep, personal stuff going on for a lot of people. I don't want to mess with that, but yeah, I mean, be 9/11 cape person and go run around and tell people that. Be really fun and people will love it, and then they'll be like, oh my goodness, and I'm going to look at this. Or, my second favorite thing is the guy, I think he's in Canada, I can't remember, but he built a giant truck van, and it was just a giant architects and engineers billboard with TVs, and it opened up, and it was awesome. And he would just drive to different places. That's ridiculous. Get as creative as you want. Get 50 people to stand outside of Noam Chomsky's house every single day chanting, please look at the evidence. I mean, that kind of stuff. I think that's what TAP, really, Truth Action Project, should be about. Not this top-down thing, but a sort of peer-to-peer grassroots type thing. I want to encourage each person to do what they want to do, not one idea that everyone has to conform to.
Bingo. Love that. Encourage people to express themselves and take action in the ways that inspire them and are meaningful to them.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we can keep doing that. And I think that that's how people will stay engaged. And you know how? Because people do stuff on their own. I was in touch with a man who did a 9/11 truth themed billboard on something that he put in the Labor Day parade in his community just to raise awareness for them. I mean, people come up with ideas on their own. I mean, that's how I came up with the unthinkable thing. I literally was like in total isolation in coronavirus land, quarantine. And it was just like, oh, this is what feels natural to me. I'm going to start this page and create content that's, evidence-based or inspirational, because we need more cohesive behavior and activity within the unit. We can stay homogenous. We are all unique. We all have our own thing, but the cohesion is what we need. So it kind of weaves us like a tapestry, and then everybody's color and everybody's fiber may be different, but we can kind of weave that tapestry by capitalizing on our strengths, realizing we each have different strengths and weaknesses, and that's okay. Just because we have weaknesses doesn't mean that we're doomed. We're people, we're not perfect. The whole world, most of the whole world thinks we're insane anyway, even though we actually are not. Most of us are not. clinically speaking, of course. Um, you know what I mean? I
Absolutely.
appreciate your vision. I appreciate your leadership and the leading message that you have.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of think of us as you know, what I want to do is you know, give everyone their patch on a giant quilt. Um, and you know, you sort of use the independence of the millennial generation. You sort of you learn how to work with what you got, I think, and which is why I want to have a very sort of this is your square. You can do whatever you want with it. You get to paint it your color. It's kind of like MySpace, but with your square you can wield. You've got this much power with that square. You can do this. You can vote. You can whatever. But we all fit together like that. If you want to make your theme this way, and kind of like a chain link fence, we each form a part of the whole. And so it's kind of working with the independence and the creativity, while at the same time, I say, why don't we try to do it in the same room? Like, you guys over there, you've got some interpretive dance 9/11 stuff going on. I don't know what you're doing. Like, this person's working on a seminar, awesome. But let's do it in the same room so we can be together. The mainstream media, the mainstream society has allowed us no room, no quarter, no space, no oxygen. And that's part of the reason our movement is so divided in a million pieces, because we don't get to vet stories, this theory, that theory, with the experts in a central place on the news and the Times and the papers, like stories that aren't heavily censored. They get out, they air. You can find this, you can see that, and everyone might have had this opinion or that opinion, but they all basically get that this is happening. But 9/11 Truth. So what we have to do is establish a beachhead and have our own culture. We 9/11 Truth, everything with it is like 99% research and then fighting over it.
Yeah.
We need to hang out with each other, go get a drink, get coffee, whatever, go golf or something. We need to talk to each other. We need to hear our stories. People that are in this camp that believe this about the towers, or people are that with the Pentagon or whatever in the flights and all that action. Why can't we realize that we are at base a truth movement? There may be shills. I'm not against that. If you really think, I'm not going to tell you not to sort of try to out somebody, but
Yeah, and
I
I'm not
don't.
going to say that there aren't either.
Yeah, that's a very tough thing, but we got to kind of act towards our goals anyway. Um, but yeah, I guess I'll stop it there.
That was awesome. Morgan, it has been so cool to hear your opinions and your deep, deep thoughts just about the expansive universe that is 9/11 Truth. Because, as you say, we don't have a lot of space. So even on Facebook and social media, it's very hard for us to create space for us to breathe and to have community. Um, that was the biggest thing for me with the last few months of 9/11 Truth, Action, Justice, getting to know people from different organizations, like 9/11 Truth Action Project, Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, Justice for 9/11 Heroes, or Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Just getting to know people and hearing their stories has been so inspirational. And when you say, let's be in the same room, that resonates with me, because what happens when I'm in the same room, so to speak, with these people is you inspire me and it sets off a chain reaction. Like, you'll create a piece of content that I see that's based on this research. And once it piques my interest and I go back and read that research myself, because I need to see it if I've never seen it with my own eyes. God forbid I believe people. that, I also trust and work with. I have to look at everything myself too. And then something will go off in my brain and we'll have a new idea or another new thing that we can do. And so that to me only validates the organic grassroots nature of the movement, because it's not like the things that we do may be in different, there's different different loci of where this thing is, but the vector is in the same direction, physics talking here, and having the opportunity to have community with other people whose approach to 9/11 truth and justice is the same as mine or similar to mine, it's an empowering and very humanizing experience in what is otherwise profoundly traumatic, deeply disturbing, and honestly, I would prefer, let me put it this way, I am always conflicted about 9/11 truth. Part of me wishes that everyone would know the truth, the whole truth, but I don't even want to know every detail of the entire truth, because there are some things that I just never want to know. Like, I personally can't watch Zero Dark 30. I don't want to know what's going on at Guantanamo Bay because I cannot think about that. That is just too traumatic for me. And so I will allow someone else to fully explore that topic, and then I will just have to let it go. But for me, I can say, with certainty that I know that what happened on September 11th in New York City is not what we were told on the news, that it came down by fire after being hit by one airplane each. The steel was weakened, etc. There's overwhelming evidence, as you said, for incendiaries, explosives, and then World Trade Center Building 7 is a very clear example of a controlled demolition, which has been, also scientifically validated by the University of Alaska Fairbanks study through architects and engineers in 9/11 Truth and Leroy Halsey. I mean, two decades later, we've got the meat and potatoes. And I'm just so grateful that there are intelligent, courageous, dynamic, and even funny people like you and hundreds of others that I've met in the movement who make the journey a lot more fun when it's otherwise very, very tragic and depressing. So I appreciate your community, and I'm so glad that I got this opportunity to get to know you a little more, and we'll share it so that other folks in the movement can kind of get to know you and me, and then I look forward to chatting with you again. I'm sure we'll get on a podcast and go rant down a rabbit hole one day.
Woohoo!
All right. Morgan, thank you so much. And I really hope that this recording worked.
Thank you.
If it didn't, I guess we'll do it again.
Right on.
All right. Thank you, Morgan.